Hello, and welcome to the Classical Guitar Heroines podcast.
Join us as we celebrate the remarkable contributions of women in this timeless art form, featuring insightful interviews, captivating stories, and performances that showcase their talent and dedication.
I'm your host, Bridget Gerard, classical guitarist and member of the Kitchener-Waterloo Guitar Orchestra.
And I'm your host, Mariette Stevenson, founder, music director, and conductor of the Kitchener-Waterloo Guitar Orchestra and professor of guitar at Wilfrid Laurier University and the University of Waterloo.
We are excited to bring you the lives and music of these classical guitar heroines, past and present, to share with you their enduring impact on music and our world. Our guest on this episode is American guitarist Izzy Fincher. Izzy Fincher is a classical guitarist and writer based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Izzy is currently pursuing master's degrees in classical guitar performance and women in gender studies at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She is a student of Renee Esquerdo. As a queer Japanese-American woman, Izzy is passionate about sharing the stories of marginalized female, BIPOC, and LGBTQ plus creatives through research and activism. With her commitment to musical diversity and lyrical, expressive style, Izzy is establishing herself as a versatile performer of traditional and contemporary classical repertoire. In 2023, Izzy graduated summa cum laude from the University of Colorado Boulder with a BM in classical guitar performance, business minor, and certificates in music entrepreneurship and music theory. She received the Outstanding Graduate Senior Award from CU Boulder's College of Music. Izzy is a freelance journalist, writer, and researcher. She holds a BA in journalism from CU Boulder and is pursuing a master's degree in women's and gender studies at UW Milwaukee. Her research focuses on journalism, media and mass communication, popular music, intersectional feminism, racism, and LGBTQIA+ rights. Izzy has written numerous articles for various publications, and her undergraduate honors thesis, An Examination of Mainstream Media's Treatment of Female Guitarists, has been published in the Journal of Popular Music Studies and featured in Guitar World, She Said So, and Loud Women. She has presented her research at the Guitar Foundation of America Conference, the International Communication Association Conference, the UW-Madison Women's and Gender Studies Consortium, the Global Conference on Global Studies, and the International Conference on Gender Studies and Sexuality. Here is Izzy Fincher performing Dialogue by George Lynn and flutist Cassandra Lopez.
That was our guest, Izzy Fincher, performing Dialogue by George Lynn with flutist Cassandra Lopez. Izzy, welcome to the Classical Guitar Heroines podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to be a part of your podcast.
Oh, it's our pleasure. We've been following your career and are very excited to have you as a guest. We have lots to chat about with your incredibly busy career as a musician and writer. When did you discover classical guitar?
So I've been playing classical guitar since I was 6 years old. My Montessori preschool teacher named Judy inspired me to start. She played folk music on her acoustic guitar, and we would all sit around in a circle every day and sing along. And so I remember begging my parents to let me learn guitar, and my father signed me up accidentally for classical guitar lessons instead of acoustic guitar lessons. So remember I showed up with like a candy apple red guitar with steel strings. And I was very disappointed.
That's so cute.
Yeah, I think it was from Toys R Us, and I was convinced that I was going to be like Taylor Swift or a rock star, and instead I had to play like Twinkle Twinkle and like learn rest stroke and free stroke. But it ended up being like a very happy accident, obviously, and I fell in love with the instrument, and I knew I discovered my lifelong passion. So that's how I got started in classical guitar.
That's amazing. So not only are you an accomplished guitarist, but you also have a bachelor's degree in journalism at CU Boulder and are pursuing a master's degree in women and gender studies at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. When did you discover your desire to be a writer and journalist?
So growing up, I loved reading. I read lots of different like styles like fiction, fantasy, classic novels, murder mysteries. I used to write my own creative short stories and I really wanted to be a creative writing major in college. However, I was already doing music, which is another passion project, and I decided I needed to do something a little bit more practical, but still focused on my passion for writing. And so I always loved languages, expressing myself creatively that way. And so I decided to do that as my second major at CU Boulder. And it turned out that journalism was actually the perfect choice for my creative background because I focused on arts journalism, creative, visual arts, theater, dance, popular music, classical music. And my beat was basically like the local art scene in Denver and Boulder. And I specifically focused on portraying Asian American and queer underrepresented creatives. And so I worked for our student newspaper, the CU Independent, for 5 years during my time at CU Boulder as an arts editor and later a managing editor. And going to UW Milwaukee, I kind of transformed that more into like the activism side. So I've mostly been focusing on research and writing about the media and about mass communication based off that experience in journalism. But it's been really great how those two passions for music and for writing really work together in tandem.
It's fantastic. How did your family feel about your decision to become a guitarist and a writer?
Ever since a young age, I've always been a very creative and artistic person. So I think it's hardly surprising to my friends and family that I decided to pursue music professionally. And my family's always been very supportive of my creative pursuits. My grandmother used to sing, and her mother as well was like a pianist. And so there's a lot of music that runs in the family. My father was in drum corps all the way to college. And so there's always been like that creative aspect in the family, and I'm the first one to really pursue it professionally, and they've been very supportive. So my first instrument was classical piano. I started at age 4, and then I started with guitar a couple years later. I played a lot of different instruments growing up in middle and high school, like electric guitar, bass, flute, percussion. And I also sang classically and did some musical theater. So I was just very creative and tried out a lot of different arts as well as like graphic design, dance, creative writing. It was really wonderful. And it really also gave me that background in arts journalism is that I'd kind of dabbled in a little bit of
Oh,
everything. So
that's
definitely
amazing.
wasn't an expert in all of that, but having that really like holistic arts background, I feel like really had a great influence on my creativity in general. So I decided to pursue classical guitar specifically and really just focus on one of my creative passions. My diverse artistic interests really gave me a unique perspective on my musical career, and I just really have appreciated like all those types of arts and those influences, and it's been very inspirational for my own creativity, and I'm just so grateful for all my family's support throughout that whole process.
That's fantastic. Yeah. And you have studied with many incredible teachers, including Renee Esquerdo, Adam Holtzman, Nicola Spira, and Sharon Isman. And how have they influenced and encouraged you?
So I've been so grateful to study with, as you mentioned, so many incredible teachers, and it's been very, very inspirational for me. First, I'll start out with my undergraduate program. So I studied with Nicola Spera at CU Boulder, and he was a very supportive and encouraging teacher. He really was on my side about all of the creative pursuits I had for women in guitar. He was very flexible and accommodating with my decision to pursue a double degree. And I'm just so grateful for all of his support while I was at CU Boulder. When I was in my undergraduate degree, I also studied privately and in the summer with Adam Holtzman from the University of Texas, Austin. I met him at the Brevard Summer Institute, and he has been a very, very influential mentor and role model for me. I just really can't express how grateful I am for his guidance and support for so many years. He is an incredible teacher for technique, for musicality, and he just trains like the highest caliber of students. And so to study with him and to see where his career has gone, like professionally and artistically, as well as his teaching career, just was really a great honor. And especially he was very supportive of my goals of performing underrepresented repertoire by female composers. And so we worked through a lot of diverse repertoire that he'd never done before. And he was always very excited to kind of showcase and explore and get through all of that new repertoire. And he always just pushed me to be the best guitarist and musician I could be. And so just incredibly grateful for him. Then for my master's degree, I decided to study with Renee Izquierdo at UWM. So I'm in the second year of my master's program, and it really has been an incredible and inspiring experience so far, being part of such a talented community. The studio here is very big. We're about like 15 to 20 students. So definitely one of the biggest programs in the country for just one teacher. And Renee just works so hard, and he's always makes time for all of his students, even with his really busy performing career. I'm just so grateful for his support, especially with my passion for representing women in classical guitar. He's definitely, without a doubt, the best in the field for building like a strong foundation of technical skills. And so it's really helped me get to the next level with my guitar playing, to be able to, interpret and execute all repertoire, especially diverse repertoire by female composers and other underrepresented composers, at that highest possible level. So that's been very inspirational. And finally, talking about Sharon Isbin. So I studied with Sharon at the Aspen Music Festival in Colorado in 2022 and 2023. It was also very inspiring for me because growing up as a woman in guitar, Sharon was one of my favorite guitarists and was definitely an icon and role model in the field for female and queer guitarists. I remember I saw one of her master classes when I was maybe 8 or 9. I had like my little stuffed animals that I had brought. I had like a little frog and like a little llama that I put on the chair, and they were also watching the master class. So that was one of my first memories of seeing her perform and teach. And then to actually have that chance to study with her so many years later was very exciting. And all the commissioning projects and premieres of new works by contemporary composers that she does, it's really incredible. So I'm just grateful for that opportunity to attend Aspen in such a beautiful place and to study with her and with my incredible colleagues there. And so I really can't wait to go back one day.
Well, how does your passion for feminism, journalism, and research intersect with your career as a musician?
So I found that these diverse interests of feminism, activism, journalism, and the arts, they've kind of really built on each other in very exciting ways. So I think that specifically it's kind of given me a mission as a guitarist, because especially with classical repertoire, it can be difficult to find your voice because you're performing works by composers who have been dead for a long time. It's like, how is this relevant? How am I speaking to audiences in the contemporary way? And also, how am I setting myself apart from everyone else who's playing this repertoire? And for me, it really coalesced as having this mission as an artist. And so it really connected, I would say, from being at CU Boulder, which is a very, very liberal community, and being part of like the Diverse Musicians Alliance, which is where we got to talk a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we had these concerts featuring just female composers, and it really led me to like question more about my identity and explore that. And that really kind of led me like to that mission. So my identity being queer and having Japanese heritage, my grandmother came to the United States. She married an American serviceman after World War II. So we have some Japanese heritage in the family, and all of that identity background and living abroad in China for a few years, it really just inspired me to be involved in activism and like advocating for diversity, equity, and inclusion in music and in the media that's portraying music. And so I feel like these different interests and expertise, they're like very unique. Like there's not many people in classical guitar who also like have a journalism degree. It's very specific. And so that's really given me kind of the impetus to research topics that had never been explored before. And it's really given me that unique mission in my career. I feel like that intersectionality has been really, really exciting for me.
With that, we will now listen to you perform George Lynn's piece Cantabile, transcribed for flute and guitar by you. This performance features Denver-based flautist Cassandra Lopez. So, who was George Lynn and what drew you to his music?
George Lynn is a composer and conductor who taught at CU Boulder for several years and was very active in the American music scene in the 20th century. So he wrote over 1,600 works, 200 of which were published in his lifetime. And at the American Music Research Center at CU Boulder are boxes of his manuscripts, and they were donated by his family. And so each year they have the George Lynn Memorial Award, which is a grant from the family to encourage local CU Boulder students to perform his music. Primarily, they've done his choir repertoire because that's mostly what he's known for. And so this project was more innovative, where I proposed transcribing some of his lesser known instrumental works. And I transcribed some of his violin works, solo violin for classical guitar, and then flute and bassoon, which is dialogue and pastorale. It's from a set of 6 pieces for those 2 instruments. And instead, I put it for guitar as the bassoon part. And then cantabile is originally for oboe and piano. And we're not playing, obviously, either of those instruments. So the key changes and everything, I worked through that for the project to make it work with guitar and flute. And so that was a really exciting project that I did in the second year of my undergraduate degree. Unfortunately, at the end of the project, we didn't get to do the final performance due to COVID, because we were supposed to, do a final performance and then do a recording session in 2020 with my duo partner at the time, and do also some piazzolla, a lot of really cool repertoire. And so finally, after the pandemic, I'd reached out to Christina, George Lynn's daughter, about seeing if I could continue the project, because I had got the grant and I really wanted to finally finish it. And so I worked with her to actually get it recorded at a local performance space in Boulder. And then I brought on a friend who is Cassandra Lopez, a Denver-based flutist who is very, very talented, and I was excited to collaborate with her. And then I ended up doing all of the audio and video editing for the project and getting it up on YouTube. So it's a very exciting project, definitely, and I'm excited to share it with everyone.
That was Izzy Fincher and Cassandra Lopez performing Cantabile by George Lynn. You are listening to the Classical Guitar Heroines podcast. So let's talk about your work with women of classical guitar. You recently presented about Madame Sidney Pratten's method books and pedagogical literature of the Victorian era England at the 2024 Guitar Foundation of America conference. Could you please tell us a little bit about your inspiration for this project and your findings about Madame Pratten's career?
This is the second major project that I've done about women of classical guitar specifically. I was inspired to research Madame Pratten's guitar school because there's not a lot of materials about it, but she was the only woman to publish under her name pedagogical materials during the Victorian era. Basically, I wanted to do a pedagogical lineage tree tracing her work from her father, Ferdinand Peltzer, who was an influential guitarist and music educator in England, and also was like a co-editor and publisher of the Julian, which was basically kind of a fan magazine about Giuliani during this era. And
Mm.
during her career, she taught over 2,000 students, including influential aristocratic figures. And she also had many famous students, including Ernest Shand and someone who wrote her biography. So she had a lot of kind of an indelible impact on the Victorian era guitar scene, but she just really isn't remembered. And people don't use her method books looking back. And so basically, this is an examination of how the success of her teaching studio and self-published method books and compositions enabled her to build a career as an entrepreneurial performer and teacher while challenging the gender barriers of the male-dominated professional guitar scene. So over the course of her 4-decade teaching career, Pratten published 3 method books: Instructions for the Guitar Tuned in E Major, Guitar Tutor in School, and Learning the Guitar Simplified. So in this study, it's kind of just a comparative analysis of her works with other leading method books and why hers was specifically innovative because she targeted female guitarists of the aristocracy specifically and made it so very more accessible to them. And there's a lot of gender politics in the way that she's representing herself and how she made herself as a successful career woman. So it's been a really exciting project, and getting to present it for the scholarly track at the GFA was really, really exciting this year. And I'm hoping to develop the project further to get it at a few more conferences and hopefully published in an academic journal.
So during your undergraduate studies, you researched French guitarist Ida Presti's career as a composer for your music theory certificate senior thesis project and presented your findings in a lecture recital. Can you talk more about this interesting project?
Definitely. So this is my first project about women in guitar before I went to the Pratten project. So Ida Presti is one of my favorite composers. I initially discovered her through Heike Madison's Archive of Women in Music, based in Frankfurt. Heike was an incredible activist, and all of her efforts of archiving women's music online with her website and Spotify playlists was just been a really big resource for me during my whole research projects. And through her, as well as Candace Mowbray, who wrote extensively about Ida Presti, I learned about her legacy as a composer and kind of that identity as a solo performer outside of the Presti-Lagoya duo, which is mostly what she's known for. During this process, I decided to focus on her solo work specifically. She has 16, and they're all very beautiful and they're very underplayed. So her probably 3 most famous works are Étude du Matin, Danse Rhythmique, and Segovia. Specifically, the angle that I took for my thesis project was researching 2 pieces specifically, Prelude en pensant en Bach and Étude 3 en pensant en Bach, from a set of 3 etudes that she has. And so I was just interested in how she uses quotations and homages to Bach in her works, because she talks about him being one of her greatest inspirations. And at the Lagoya duo, she also performed a lot of arrangements of Bach, of the French suite, of the English suite. So he was definitely one of her biggest influences, as he is for many guitarists. And so it was very interesting to explore how she crafts her neoclassical, very contemporary 20th century style with influences and homages to Bach. And so at the end of this project, my senior year at CU Boulder, I had a lecture recital where I played through both of these pieces and then based off of my understanding of it, the certain cello suites that each section was coming from in the excerpts. And so this was a really exciting project that I got to work on. And there's really just not a lot of recordings of her works too. Candice Mowbray has recorded some of her works, and Olivier Chassin, who studied with Lagoy at the Paris Conservatory, has some of her duo works. And then Carlotta Dahlia was the first person to record all of her solo works in an album that recently came out. But definitely her legacy as a composer should definitely be remembered more. And it's been really exciting to contribute to some more scholarship about that.
That is extremely cool. I'm really
Mhm.
excited to listen to all of that. And what other female composers have you researched and or performed works by?
As I mentioned before, the Diverse Musicians Alliance at CU Boulder was really kind of an inspirational part of all of this women in music and women in classical guitar for me. So it all started out with our Persevering Legacy concert series through DEMA, which featured female composers. And being part of this organization every year, we were asked to perform for the showcase. And I remember just being shocked because I could not think of a single composer who'd written a piece for a classical guitar. And I asked my teacher, I'd asked my friends, and nobody could think of anything. And I really caused me to reflect. I was like, I've never had a female teacher. My entire studio is male right now. And I just had this whole like epiphany of, whoa, women play guitar, why am I not seeing us represented anywhere? And so that's what led me to find Heike's work and Candice's work. And through that process, all of the works that I've like researched and performed are due to the research that they've done. So I'm just so grateful building off of everything that they've put in. And so what I found from a lot of their lists and what I played in some of those earlier recitals was works by Sofia Gubidalina. She's written 2 works for solo guitar, Serenade and Toccata. And then I also have played Maya LaRue Obradovic's Concerto Latino. There is actually, it was a bit challenging. I programmed this for my senior recital, and there's no piano reduction of the orchestral score. So I had to give my pianist the full score, and she did an incredible job arranging it just by sight. And so I was very grateful for how talented she is. And we really pulled it together, and it was a really exciting performance because it really, I don't think it's been programmed in the United States. Definitely was a Colorado premiere. The only recording that exists is by the composer. There's an arrangement for 2 guitars that it's also on YouTube. But definitely, there's also a list of, I think, at least 50, if not more, concertos by female composers, and there's no recordings of almost any of them. It's on Heike's website. If you go to the section, there's a whole chamber music section, then there's solo. For each instrument, there's like clarinet, flute, violin, duos, and then there's the concerto list. And she also has the concertos in a Spotify playlist. Just going through that and saying, for concerto competitions, everyone always plays Aranjuez. So even just programming a different
Mhm.
concerto by a male composer is risky. But then to think, it's like, what if I programmed a concerto by a female composer? And it didn't end up working out due to the issues with the orchestral score. And so I wasn't actually able to compete in our school's concerto competition, but it still led me to think it's like, we can take these actions, these activist actions, just in the repertoire that we're choosing. And it's like, it doesn't matter whether you win the concerto competition or not. If you go out and you make a statement like that, that's going to change the way that people are reflecting on the repertoire they're choosing. And that representation is really, really important. So
100%. Yeah.
like right now, I'm working on some other repertoire by Dale Kavanaugh, Clarice Assad, Madame Pratton, and Amelia Giuliani, but there's just an incredible amount of resources to find more female composers.
That's fantastic. And let's turn to your research about female guitarists in popular music and the media. You have written numerous articles about your research, which examines how women guitarists in different music genres have been treated by the media. And can you talk about your article, An Examination of Mainstream Media's Treatment of Female Guitarists, which was published this March in the Journal of Popular Music Studies?
So this is my undergraduate honors thesis in journalism at CU Boulder. I had initially wanted to research representations of female classical guitarists in the media, but that project was already beyond niche and the only resources I could find were in Spanish. So I decided to pivot to
Mm.
popular music. Never really played electric guitar. I'm not super familiar with women in rock. So I really had to dive in and listen to a lot of different artists, but it became like really definitely a passion project because while other people were doing these really dense, difficult research theses, like I was just looking up archival issues of Rolling Stone and Cream and just and Billboard. I'm like, this is fun. This is not really research. And so that's why the project kind of grew from just like a little honors thesis to like this huge project because it was just so much fun. I had a wonderful time working on it. This project is about how the music press in the US has like underrepresented and marginalized female guitarists, which is just reinforcing the masculinization of electric guitar in rock music culture. I do a kind of a quantitative textual analysis of 43 of the most influential female guitarists based off an amalgamation of several lists. And I analyzed 10 mainstream newspapers and music magazines, including New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Billboard, Cream, and I from 1959 to 2023, and that yielded about 744 articles, which to do by
Oh,
hand
wow.
is a lot, but shockingly, 744 from 10 top publications over 60 years is not a lot. Like there's probably 700
True.
articles about Jimi Hendrix from 1 year.
True enough. Yeah.
Hmm.
So as many as it seemed, it's like it's talking about 40 women over 60 years, and that's all there is. So the numbers seem, and definitely doing it by
Mm.
hand was not the most efficient way for this quantitative coding analysis, but it was very shocking to find how like the erasure of female guitarists, especially Black women, is manifested in the press. It's really just focusing on how like the ways that women are denied credibility by focusing on their femininity and their appearance and their sexuality and how they're just like denied greatness. This is like the first research paper of this kind, which is why I was able to get it published in the Journal of Popular Music Studies. There's a lot of research about women in the media and just rock music in general, specifically focusing how singers are portrayed, but there's nothing about representations of women in guitar. So this has been a really exciting project that got featured in Rolling Stone, and some feminist publications, She Said So and Loud Women. And it's published in the Journal of Popular Music Studies through the California Press. And so it's accessible online, for this through a subscription, or people can reach out to me or read through the other online articles about it. But it's been a really exciting project that I've kind of been expanding on in my master's program too.
That's absolutely incredible and mind-blowing. I wanted to ask you a specific question from your article because you wrote, during the golden age of music journalism in the 1960s, male journalists rarely featured female guitarists and displayed blatant sexism in their coverage when they did. For example, in the article, Fanny, a four-girl rock group, poses a challenge to male ego. The critic writes, going to see an all-girl rock group, one has to bring a mixture of condescension and paranoia. What if they're good? What will that possibly do to the old male ego? And so my question to you is, how did that statement make you feel when you read it? Like, did that spur you to highlight women more in guitar? Because I'll tell you, when I read it, I just about blew my top.
Yeah, so that headline is a particularly shocking one, and it
Yeah.
was definitely featured in the headline of the Guitar World article about my work. And the shocking part is this isn't even the worst one of what I saw.
Oh,
Oh, wow.
really?
Definitely, no, the rock music press, especially in the 60s and 70s, it's been researched by other, especially Helen Davies has a really interesting paper from the early 2000s about how it's an old boys club, and then basically the homosociality of the rock music press. It's a bunch of male journalists writing about their favorite male artists, and it's just basically an ego like power play. And some of the things of what they say about women, it's shocking, specifically the Runaways, the first like all
Yeah, yeah,
female rock, Joan Jett,
yeah.
and with Fanny as well. The coverage is very shocking, and there's some, especially in Cream,
Mm.
I would say, there's it discusses it in the article, but very blatant sexualization and sexual objectification of like them describing their fantasies of what they want these celebrity women to do to them, and they're just like a male journalist who should be interviewing them. Like it's beyond inappropriate. It's things that you would see like in a weird, creepy Reddit comment that you would never expect to see published
Uh,
in an actual journal. And so I remember, because obviously like these sexist frames that we go into, the nuances of why like the word and the gender discourse is so powerful is more complicated, but things like this, it's just shocking that this could be published and that it was okay. And it's like, because all of the writers are male, all of their editors are male, all of their readers are male, no one's going to speak out about it, because any woman in this process who sees something like this is like, this is incredibly offensive. And it's like, especially for these young girls who are trying to make
yeah,
a career in the rock music industry where it's already really difficult to, they're getting destroyed by the press. And especially when it's these personal vicious attacks like that, that's, I mean, the fact that they were still able to have careers and go on, but you know, the impact on their mental health and their kind of self-perceptions is terrible, because to read something like this in a major publication by a famous journalist, it's terrible. It's like, so it's like this thing about Fanny, it's like it's saying, can women be successful? And like it's hurting my ego that women are actually playing well.
yeah,
And so this is really shocking, and there are a lot more excerpts as well in the rest of the article that are very shocking. But I think the thing that's most surprising is like this is from the 60s, this is from the 70s, some of it's even from the 80s. It's like it wasn't that long ago, and the sexism in rock music culture, it's still a very pervasive issue, especially there's a lot of research talking about certain genres too. Women in heavy metal still really struggle.
right,
And like women in electric guitar, it's much harder than if they play acoustic guitar, because then they're conforming more to gender stereotypes. And
right.
specifically, women who sing are viewed as, this is one of the main issues I describe in the article, is women who sing and play guitar
Yeah.
are singers. But most famous guitarists,
Mhm.
like Jimi Hendrix, he sang too, but no one ever goes Jimi Hendrix the singer.
Right.
A very interesting frame that we don't always think about, but women are just always, even when they try and innovate and break free from gender norms, even gender discourse and everything about like the structural social structures of rock music culture and just of our society just places them back into those gender binaries. Things like that. I mean, yeah, it's an outrage that something like that would be
Yeah,
printed.
for
And
sure.
so that does inspire me to kind of continue with this work, because it's like sexism is not always that blatant, but the impact and is still seen today. And even in recent publications, it's still something that we need to address. And this research shows, everyone goes, oh, women in guitar, there are not many of them. There is some sexism. It's bad. But this is the first time it quantitatively we see
How bad?
how
Yeah.
bad it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask, do you still see that do you still have to deal with male egos in the guitar world, and what has been the response to your article in the guitar community?
So my research is about popular music, so definitely people who've been reaching out to me and been interested in the article through my Instagram are mostly hobbyists who play electric guitar as well, or just like academic researchers in popular music. So it's not really necessarily the classical guitar community unless they're like friends
Right,
or colleagues who are as involved, but definitely in popular music and in rock there's so many artists saying that this is still a major problem and the
really.
industry is still very sexist. So, and even just guitar world, guitar player, they still don't really feature women. So it's just as pervasive in that industry as well. And from like the classical guitar community, I mean, I think we can see it as well reflected in competition programs, even at the most major competitions, or just even at a school performance, looking at the program, there will not be a woman on the program. There will not be a queer composer. There will not be a BIPOC composer unless there's specifically someone with one of those identities who is one of the performers who goes, this is a mission for me.
Right.
And so it's a problem. And canonical repertoire is the basis of university music education. And most teachers in the US and in Europe are men. And like I've only studied with male teachers, and most of my colleagues have always been men. And it's obviously they're doing their best to support and they want to be open to it, but still like that mindset of when you say, what's a romantic era piece that you like? they never pick a song by a female composer. And it's like leading into those gender dynamics of male is genius and women writing salon music from that era.
Mm-hmm.
There's still those prejudices. It's like, oh, I will play a piece by a woman composer just like to get those diversity points, but they're not playing it because they love it or because they feel it's at the same level. And so
Right.
it's just because that qualifier of it's always, oh, play repertoire by a woman composer. It's never by a composer, but I'm not going to say, oh, why are you playing so much repertoire by a male composer? Like when you flip it around, it makes no sense. And
Yeah.
that's just like an illustration of sexism. So I feel like everyone is very supportive and really wants to acknowledge and wants to make changes, but fundamentally we just need more women involved and more awareness to really get the change that we want to see.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Here is Izzy Fincher performing movement number 2, the Adagio, from Maya LaRue Obradovich's Concerto Latino with pianist Barbara Noyes. That was our guest, Izzy Fincher, performing movement number 2, the Adagio, from Concerto Latino with pianist Barbara Noyes by Maya LaRue Obradovich.
You are listening to the Classical Guitar Heroines podcast. So, continuing on with what we were just discussing, let's chat about BIPOC classical composers. And here are some stats that I'd like to share. In Done's Women in Music's report, Equality and Diversity in Global Repertoire 2021 to 2022, only 7.7% of orchestral works performed were written by women, of which 5.5 were by Caucasian women. Less than 0.1% of performed orchestral works were composed by non-binary composers, and 1% were composed by Black women composers. 87.7% were composed by white men, 76.4% were composed by dead white male composers, and 27.5% of all pieces performed globally were written by 10 composers, all white, historical European men. Their music has been performed nearly 4 times more than all pieces by women combined. So, Izzy, Can you address this disparity, and do we have any statistics when it comes to classical guitar repertoire?
So from my experience as a researcher, I'm mostly doing quantitative work in popular music. So I can't speak necessarily from that academic perspective. I can only speak from my perspective just
Mm,
as a performer. And as I've mentioned before, diversity, equity, and inclusion in classical music is a huge issue that we've definitely been reckoning with since 2020,
mm,
specifically when had that heightened awareness. And there's really been all those movements to like remain relevant, include diverse identities. At GFA, they're definitely focusing on working with composers to commission new works for younger, diverse students. And there have been so many initiatives. Like Christopher Mallet has rediscovered the works of Justin Holland. He presented this year at GFA when it was
mm,
really incredible. He has also recently released a CD. Thomas Lippen's work with Duo Noir has been really incredible, and we featured him at Exequos Changing the Canon project, which was a commissioning project featuring 9 Black American composers writing works for solo guitar that were recorded and premiered in a visual album. So there's definitely been a lot of initiatives recently, but I still feel that we're lagging behind in other instruments. For example, I was looking at the concert programs of the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra for this season, and it still wasn't super diverse for mostly who we would expect to see on the program. But I saw Lily Boulanger on the program, and that was like exciting. I'm like, we're finally seeing some change. There's more Florence
mm,
Price, there's more Clara Schumann, Fanny Mendelssohn. We're seeing some change. It's not a lot, but I feel like it is more of an open dialogue. I just don't feel like I know if I've seen as much change in the guitar circles except by women who are
mm.
doing that. There are more women involved and we are taking action, but I don't know if it's been reflected in the same way. At the same time, we're making progress and there's definitely a lot to be proud of. And all of these initiatives that I've talked about and the many others that are going on are just things we need to keep going with. We need to keep that momentum
Exactly.
up.
I'm going to just bring this discussion back to your work as a classical guitarist. You've also premiered works by various composers through the Twisted Spruce Music Foundation Symposium. Can you discuss the commission process and working with the composers who write music for guitar?
I've been really grateful to be involved with the Twisted Spruce Music Foundation through Nathan Fisher, who was previously at Indiana University and now he's at Juilliard. So this has kind of been his passion project about how do we connect composers with guitarists to premiere new works. And the best part of this symposium is that it's online. Due to COVID, it had to be for those format reasons, but now it's just actually a very accessible way where you don't have to spend a lot of money to travel to a festival. You can be anywhere in the world and collaborate with someone. And so there, Azariah Felton, who wrote for the first year of Twisted Spruce, was all the way in Australia, and we were Zoom calling with him. So that accessibility.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and so it's a really, really incredible symposium because it also features a competition where at the end you get a prize guitar and then you get a recording of your album. So it's like that balance of competition, but also collaboration and just overall a very
Mm.
positive environment. And so through Twisted Spruce, I had my first opportunity as well to work with composers who write for guitar. So I worked as a social media coordinator and later like an operations manager helping out with the details of the online symposium. And for the first year, I worked with Alex Tedrow, incredibly talented composer. And he wrote this piece for me called Thwack, which was Bracciato and extended techniques. We had just been talking and like I was like, what do you want me to do? Like a thwack? And then he was like, that's the name of the piece, which was cute. So we were having fun and he was just being super creative. And so there's some extended techniques. It's metrically more contemporary and more atonal. And so that was my first collaboration. And there's still a recording of that on my YouTube channel. And then the next piece that I did was Bendito with Marcel Castro Lima, who's this very talented Brazilian composer. And so the piece is for guitar and live electronics. It was inspired by the COVID deaths in Brazil and the United States because those were the two highest death rates around the world.
Yeah.
And so we found that that could be an inspiration for this piece. So it uses like excerpts of funeral songs in Brazil from his kind of his home region, I believe. And it's layered on top of that. It's like a theme and variations of these funeral songs through a live electronics and guitar. And I flew out to University of North Texas for their Spectrum New Music Concert Series in October of 2022 to premiere this piece live and record it. It was already premiered online at the festival, but due to an injury, I hadn't been able to premiere it. So it was exciting for me to finally go and do that live. And that was just, it's an incredible piece. And the score will be published through Twisted Spruce because they have their own publishing forum. And so that was just really exciting experience for me to get that taste of what is it like to work with a composer. And Alex was not a guitarist, so that was a little bit more challenging. But Marcel was a guitarist. So it was really incredible just how he knew how to take advantage of the instrument, but then use all of everything else he'd learned being a composer and a conductor to be really innovative. And so I'm really excited to being part of Twisted Spruce again in the future. And I also hope to just work more with composers on commissioning new works.
That's fantastic. I also wanted to ask you about your involvement with the nonprofit organization, Execo. You are currently serving as the secretary and media specialist and have been involved with Execo since 2020 for their Changing the Canon project, featuring commissions by Black American composers and their Emerging Artists Initiative in Austin this past August. How has this collaboration with Execo been so far, and why is their mission important to the classical guitar community?
So I've really been grateful to be involved with the Exequo due to my relationship with Evan Taucher. He was my TA at the Brevard Summer Institute with Adam Holtzman. So I met him I believe in 2018, and he asked me to be a part of Exequo when he founded the nonprofit during the pandemic with Hannah Murphy and Phil Goldenberg. And their goal at the time was to create a platform for new voices and diverse perspectives in the guitar community. First, they started with a competition that was meant to have ex aequo winners, meaning that there was not first, second, third prize. Anyone who was good enough to make it to the finals was a winner. So it was challenging kind of those structures of competitions and what it says about guitar culture. And then he's really worked on expanding the project into just bringing new music and like uplifting younger artists in the community. And so it's been really great to be involved since the beginning in different ways for the Changing the Canon project, which premiered 9 new works by Black American composers, which was funded by the Augustine Foundation. I did their social media campaign, which had an online competition for people to submit excerpts from the commissions before the album came out. And I also helped with the album release. And then I've also been involved with the Emerging Artists Initiative and residency. This past year, I flew out to Austin in August to do photography, operations, social media. And they premiered Thomas Lippin's new quartet in the abstract, 8 sketches on Norman Lewis, who was an influential painter in the 1960s, representing Black American life in the Harlem Renaissance. And it was a really, really incredible quartet. I was very excited to be there for the premiere, and it's going to be incredible once they release the full version with Drew Henderson. It's just been really exciting to be in such a positive space for new music, community outreach, and just really innovative projects for classical guitar. And I'm excited for what Execo has coming next.
That all sounds amazing. We're going to listen to Izzy Fincher performing Pastoral by George Lynn with flutist Cassandra Lopez.
That was our guest, Izzy Fincher, performing Pastoral by George Lynn with flutist Cassandra Lopez. You're listening to the Classical Guitar Heroines podcast. So, Izzy, do you have any projects coming up? You are so incredibly busy.
Yeah, so basically for my master's degree at UWM, I've been just expanding on the research projects that I started in undergrad, which has been really, really exciting. For my women's and gender studies classes specifically, expanding on just mainstream media representations of female electric guitarists. I've now been focusing specifically on like visual cover imagery, as well as like textual analysis of guitar magazines, such as Guitar World and Guitar Player, and also independent publications about women in music and women in guitar. So I'm presenting at a few upcoming conferences, the Global Conference on Gender Studies in Copenhagen in November. I'll be doing that online, as well as the next upcoming conference I have online will be for the International Conference for Gender Studies and Sexuality in Paris, and that's in December. And for that, I will be discussing Lawrence Philemon's book Puberty, which is representing non-binary transition through self-portrait. So that's not necessarily related to music, but that's kind of more just what I've been doing with women's and gender studies and queer activism. And shifting back to music, I am working on developing that Pratten research project for future conferences and for publication the rest of this year. And hopefully that will be accessible for people who reached out to me after GFA, and people have been excited about the project going forward. For the rest of my women's and gender studies degree, I have a lot of like very interesting classes that I've been working on research projects, seeing if I can relate it to music. And hopefully for my final thesis, I'll be able to really dive into another really big project about women in guitar in the media.
As we wind down our chat, do you have any final thoughts on women and guitar?
I always like to bring up the importance of representation. I feel like it's become a very overused word, especially in the past couple of years. Representation is important, but I feel that it can be said over and over again because it is important, and it inspires young women, and it gives people a way to see themselves reflected on stage in the media. It's like the importance of representation, it just cannot be stated enough. And so I think that every musician should do their part, even if you're not part of a marginalized group, even if you're not sure how you can get involved, there is always a way that you can take action, even if it's on a small scale. And I think that people say, well, I can't do something big, so I'm not going to do anything. But even small scale activism can start with like the conversation of when someone asks you who your favorite composer is, pick someone who's not the same old white man that everyone else is saying. When someone asks for a song recommendation or a Spotify playlist, say something different, change the conversation. And so starting from those little actions, that's how you grow a grassroots movement. It's because when you change the dialogue, that will eventually change the entire conversation and change the way that the world works. But it doesn't always have to be those big actions. Anything you do to represent BIPOC queer composers, that contemporary and historical, it really does have a huge impact on audiences, on performers, on musicians. And so as listeners, I think as well, it's really important to just diversify your playlist. It can be really easy to get stuck in, I'm going to listen to this canonical composers and the same artists I've always listened to, but go out and search for music that you haven't heard before, and then share it with your friends and share it with your community. I mean, if you're already listening to this podcast, you're already doing that, but still encouraging everyone to think about those value judgments of like, what is a great musician? Because greatness has just become involved with masculinity and genius in a certain way. How can you just break down those stereotypes and break down those assumptions on a daily basis and find that there's so many incredible composers that you like, your favorite composer you haven't discovered yet, and just keeping your ears open to
Yeah,
that.
absolutely, absolutely. Where can our audience discover more of your music and your valuable research?
My first research article is published in the Journal of Popular Music Studies, and it's accessible through the University of California Press. I have all of my research and my journalism linked on my website, izzyfincher.com. And so if you go to like the writing tab, I have all of my features that I wrote for the CU Independent, all of those interviews about like art scene in Denver and Boulder. And then I also have a tab for research. So that has my conferences as well as my academic publications. Everything should be accessible through there. And then people are always, welcome to email me and reach out if they have comments, questions. It's always great to hear from people and how like this research has influenced them, or if they're going to use it in their own projects. So they can access all of the writing that I'm doing. And I'm just hoping to do some more exciting projects to commission repertoire by female composers and record more YouTube videos of works by female composers like Amelia Giuliani and Pratt. And so I'm really just hoping to keep expanding on all of the work I've been doing with women in guitar. And I'm really excited to share it with everyone. And thank you so much for featuring me on this podcast. It's been wonderful talking.
You're very welcome.
It has absolutely been
Mhm.
our pleasure. We cannot wait to hear what you've got on your music stand for us in the future. We would like to take a second to thank our wonderful guest, Izzy Fincher, for speaking to us today. We would like to also thank Izzy Fincher and flautist Sandra Lopez for allowing us to use the music you heard in this episode. We'd also like to thank Izzy and pianist Barbara Noyes and Maya LaRue Obradovich for allowing us to use their recording in this episode.
Follow the Classical Guitar Heroines podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud. If you enjoyed what you heard, please click the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our Substack newsletter for updates. If you love our podcast and want to support us, consider visiting our Ko-fi account. You can find the link in our Facebook and Instagram pages. Every contribution, no matter the amount, helps us stay independent and keep the podcast accessible to everyone. And remember, if you are a woman that plays classical guitar, you too are a classical guitar heroine. Thank you for joining us on the Classical Guitar Heroines podcast.